My wife's name is Catherine. We met in high school, and after dating for 10 years, we got married. Catherine wasn't a particularly stunning beauty, but she had an adorable smile and a carefree personality. Soon after we got married, we were blessed with a daughter, and we named her Michelle. Catherine was a devoted woman who always supported me. At the time, my mother, who was living with us, was battling cancer, and Catherine took care of her while working part-time and raising Michelle. Although I didn't want her to push herself too hard with work, she insisted on continuing to help with the household finances. She would drop Michelle off at daycare, hand my mother over to the care of the visiting nurse, and head straight to work. No matter how tired she was, she would always insist that we eat well, go grocery shopping, and cook a homemade meal. I helped with housework whenever I could, especially on my days off, and when I could take time off work, I would take my mother to and from the hospital. That routine went on for 3 years until my mother passed away. Then, after the funeral was over and we had started to regain some sense of calm, she suddenly disappeared. She left behind divorce papers. On the table was a letter that said, "I'm sorry."
Please don't look for me. I'm sorry.
Catherine had taken only the bare minimum of her belongings and left. I had no idea why she left. I couldn't understand what had happened so suddenly. I immediately tried calling her cell phone, but all I got was an automated message saying the number was no longer in service. Could it be? Did she run away with someone? That thought crossed my mind. But I couldn't believe she had been cheating on me. The night before she disappeared,
I'll always love you and Michelle.
Catherine had said it like she always did. I was completely shocked when Catherine suddenly disappeared. If there was something so serious that she wanted a divorce, I wanted to talk it through. Ending everything with just a piece of paper and a note left me feeling frustrated. Had she been unhappy with me about something? I admit I had been relying on her devotion for a long time. Because she always kept smiling, I never noticed if she was troubled by something or if her heart had shifted to someone else. I was filled with regret. I think I cried so much that my tears almost dried up. After that, we kept waiting for Catherine to come back. Even after all this time, she never returned. I called all of her friends one by one, but they all said they didn't know where she was. She had an older sister, but she lived overseas and hadn't seen Catherine in years. Naturally, I didn't know her contact information either. Her parents had passed away when she was young, and she didn't have any close relationships with relatives. She didn't have anyone to rely on. Where could she have gone? Why did she leave in the first place? The more I thought about it, the less I felt I understood who Catherine really was. Still, I wanted to believe, so of course I never filed the divorce papers she left behind. Since then, I've raised Michelle on my own. She never acted out once, and I know I'm biased, but I think she's turned out to be a wonderful girl. Michelle is a great cook, and she makes a delicious soup for breakfast. It's a bit on the mild side, but it's comforting, and it reminds me of the soup Catherine used to make. As Michelle has grown, she's become more and more like Catherine. The way she smiles, narrowing her eyes and covering her mouth, or how she opens her mouth wide in surprise, those little gestures are just like how Catherine was in her school days. Seeing Michelle reminds me of Catherine, and it tears me apart inside. Whenever I look sad, Michelle would say,
"Cheer up, Dad. Come on, smile."
and she would give me a big, beaming smile. That face was just like Catherine's, and it made my heart ache all over again. Michelle is my only reason for living. I'm sure if it weren't for her, I never would have recovered from the shock. Michelle attended local schools for both middle and high school, and she didn't go on to college, instead entering the workforce right after graduation. Knowing how kind Michelle is, she probably gave up on college so as not to burden me. I'm just a low-paid office worker who's never been particularly good at my job, and I never managed to get promoted. I'm still a regular employee. It's pathetic. My daughter is working so hard, yet here I am. Even after becoming an adult, Michelle didn't move out and continue to live at home. I often told her, "You should live your life however you want," but she'd always respond with a laugh.
I am living the way I want. And besides, if I weren't here, you wouldn't be able to make your own meals, right? I couldn't just leave you and live on my own.
She said that with a laugh. I was so happy that my daughter stayed by my side. But I knew someday she'd meet a great guy and get married. Even though that day was still far off, sometimes the thought made me sad. Michelle turned 20 this year and officially became an adult. Then, on her birthday, we received a letter. It came in a pretty floral envelope, and both my name and Michelle's were written on it. When I checked the sender, I couldn't believe it. It was my wife's name. As I stood there in shock, Michelle came up behind me.
Mom.
She whispered softly. We went inside, opened the envelope, and saw that the letter was written in the familiar handwriting. It was definitely Catherine's. She always had such elegant handwriting, so feminine and beautiful. We eagerly began to read the letter.
I'm so sorry for leaving so suddenly. You must hate me for being so selfish. I can only imagine how worried and hurt you both must have been, and for that, I am truly sorry.
As we read the letter, tears streamed down both Michelle's and my cheeks.
There is something I want to give you. I left it with Betty, so please go see her.
That's how the letter ended. Betty is Catherine's twin sister. Even though Catherine had said they hadn't been in touch because Betty had been living abroad for years, the letter included Betty's contact information. I called her right away.
I'm so glad you reached out.
Betty said, sounding both relieved and a little sad. Catherine wrote that she left something for us. Where is she now? I asked.
Let's meet and talk in person.
And that was all she said. A few days later, after Betty gave us her address, Michelle and I went to her apartment. It seemed she had returned from overseas a few years ago. After exchanging greetings, we were shown into the living room.
Thank you so much for coming today.
Betty said, bowing her head politely. Then she looked over at Michelle and said,
You've grown so much. You look just like your mother.
She said it in a soft voice while looking down. Those words made my heart feel like it was going to break. Where is Catherine? I want to see her. Betty looked down.
I'll take you to her. I'll explain everything when we get there.
She said. We drove for about an hour until we arrived at a large hospital overlooking the ocean. What's going on?
Is Mom sick?
Our minds were in a state of panic. With a sad expression, Betty told us that Catherine had early onset dementia. Catherine had been advised by her doctor to be hospitalized and undergo rehabilitation, but she hadn't been able to tell us. Betty explained that Catherine left home because she didn't want to become a burden and didn't want us to see her as she gradually forgot her family. She thought if she told me the truth, I'd worry too much. That's why she decided to leave and check into the hospital. She had only confided in Betty. The disease progressed quickly, and Betty told us that Catherine no longer recognized even her. I broke down in tears on the spot. Michelle was crying too. Before Catherine lost her memory completely, she had asked Betty to deliver a letter for Michelle's 20th birthday. Betty then pulled a small jewelry box from her bag, took out a necklace and a ring, and said,
These. Your mother wanted me to give them to both of you.
The necklace was something Catherine had always cherished like a treasure. It was the first gift I ever bought her on our first date when we were still students. And the ring. It was her wedding ring. Back then, I couldn't afford an expensive one, but Catherine had said,
Thank you. Thank you.
as tears of joy streamed down her face.
And here's this, too.
Betty handed us another letter. It was filled with memories of a family trip we had taken. It described how we'd gone to a theme park, and Michelle had gotten too excited and ended up getting hurt in the park. It also recalled how I had fallen down hard at the amusement park and become the laughingstock of the day.
My sister wrote down these memories while she could still remember them. She asked me to deliver this letter to Michelle when she turned 20, along with her cherished necklace and ring.
Catherine had entrusted her feelings and these mementos to her sister.
I really wanted to contact you earlier, but I couldn't break my promise to my sister.
Betty said, her eyes red with tears. No, Betty, we are grateful to you. Thank you for holding on to Catherine's wishes all this time. I expressed my gratitude.
Thank you, Aunt Betty.
Michelle echoed, expressing her gratitude. And so, after decades, we were finally able to see her again. When Betty opened the door to the hospital room, there she was, my wife, now aged, her hair streaked with white.
Oh, hello. You must be from the room next door. And who are this gentleman and this lovely lady? Nice to meet you.
For years, I had imagined what I might say if I ever saw her again. But when the moment came, no words would come out. This was not at all how I had pictured our reunion. The instant our eyes met, my chest tightened and tears started to fall.
Oh dear, why are you crying so much? Did something sad happen?
Catherine peered at us with concern. Well, we actually came to clean the hospital today. Some disinfectant got into our eyes. It was a clumsy, desperate lie.
Oh, I see. Be careful then.
We stepped out of the room.
Dad, smile.
Michelle said, her eyes red as she gently patted my back. My wife had always supported me more than anyone else. She had loved me more than anyone else. And yet, I had completely failed to notice her suffering. I felt so foolish. As I slumped, Michelle spoke.
Mom might have forgotten about us, but even if she has, the memories we shared as a family are still in our hearts. I think the same goes for Mom. Her mind might forget, but her heart remembers. Let's support her as much as we can from now on.
You're right. Tears welled up in my eyes again, realizing what a remarkable daughter I had. We couldn't bring back Catherine's lost memories, and we couldn't make up for the time we'd been apart. But if there was anything we could do for her, we wanted to be there. To stay by her side, even just a little. From the next day on, we visited Catherine as often as time allowed. We talked about everything, about all the little things that had happened each day.
Talking really stimulates the brain, doesn't it?
Catherine said, and she seemed to be getting more lively. On the shelf in her hospital room, there were old photos of our family displayed.
These photos are so lovely, aren't they? They make me feel nostalgic and comforted. I get the same feeling when I talk with you both. It's a warm, familiar feeling.
She said, smiling at Michelle and me. We feel the same way, I replied, and both Michelle and I smiled back at her. To be able to smile like this together as a family of three. to be with my wife and daughter again. I had waited so long for days like this. Even if she had forgotten, the fact that we are a family will never change. From now on, I want to keep supporting her, always and forever.